Ambassador Selara Vexan of the Thexian Confederation arrived at Nexus Prime Station with the regal stride of a conqueror. Tall, slender, and cloaked in robes of shimmering azure, she moved across the docking bay as though the universe itself were laid out for her inspection. Station personnel, both human and alien, stood aside in silent awe or mild resentment. Many had heard rumors of her arrogance, how she believed herself above the laws that governed everyone else, how she never hesitated to remind others of her people's advanced technology and storied lineage. Selara's luminous yellow eyes swept across the bay, and her delicate nostrils flared at the faint tang of cleaning solvents. She curled a lip in mild distaste, as though even the air in this corner of the galaxy were beneath the Thexian standard. She gave a sharp nod to the staff assigned to greet her, then proceeded along the corridors of polished steel and translucent polymer that made up the main concourse of Nexus Prime. Her entourage, composed of lesser Thexian dignitaries, trailed behind like a shimmering train. At that same moment, Security Chief Damian Callen was reviewing his daily reports in the station's control tower. A quiet beep signaled the ambassador's arrival, and he glanced at the monitor. He watched her slender figure sweep past cameras, turning heads wherever she went. There was something in the tilt of her chin, in the set of her shoulders, that signaled boundless self-assurance. Callen, who had dealt with countless arrogant visitors in his career, felt a surge of annoyance. Nexus Prime may have been a diplomatic hub, but that did not give any ambassador the right to ignore protocol or treat station personnel like subordinates. Yet, the tensions between the Thexian Confederation and the human-led Terran Union were precariously balanced. The presence of someone as prominent as Selara Vexan was both an opportunity and a danger. With a grim frown, Callen acknowledged he would have to tread carefully. He closed the security feeds, donned his uniform jacket, and prepared to greet the ambassador in person. Little did either of them know that their first clash would mark the beginning of an unlikely alliance, and a series of events that would shake the foundations of their beliefs, culminating in a crisis that threatened every soul aboard Nexus Prime. When Callen arrived at the ambassador's assigned quarters, he found her standing at the wide observation window, gazing at the stars that glimmered beyond the station's hull. The glow cast across her features highlighted the thin ridge-like patterns on her cheekbones, a Thexian trait rumored to change color in response to strong emotions. She sensed his presence and turned, offering the barest inclination of her head. "Security Chief Callen, I presume," she said, in a voice cultured to icy perfection. "That's correct," Callen answered, keeping his tone polite. He made a point to stand upright, matching her imperious posture. "I came to officially welcome you to Nexus Prime, Ambassador Vexan." Her lips, tinted a pale shade of lavender, curved in a fractional smile. "Very well," she said. "You are welcome to do so." He maintained his composure. "If there's anything you need, please let me know. However," he continued, "I should remind you that station regulations apply to all visitors, regardless of rank or title." A soft, dismissive laugh escaped her lips, as though the notion were beneath her. "Regulations that hamper free movement and hamper the critical business of diplomacy, I trust, can be waived in the name of interstellar relations." Callen's jaw tightened. "We take the security of this station seriously, Ambassador. Protocol is for your protection as much as ours." She glanced at him, her yellow eyes gleaming. A security chief eager to uphold rules. How endearing. Before Callen could respond, Selara turned back to the window, dismissing him with a gesture. That will be all. It was clear to him then. She believed herself untouchable. He forced a polite nod and left, feeling a simmering frustration. If she acted like this over something as simple as station regulations, what further trouble would she cause in the days to come? Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Selara demanded special accommodations, private shuttle access without prior clearance, personal staff allowed in restricted corridors, even a dedicated lounge area. All her requests fell on Callen's desk for security approval, and each time, he refused to make an exception. He insisted that if she wanted to visit certain areas, she file the same requests any other diplomat would. Her official reason for being on Nexus Prime was to broker an agreement between the Thexian Confederation and another alien alliance, one that required Terran Union cooperation. The station was the perfect neutral ground. Selara recognized that. but it did not stop her from demanding preferential treatment. When Callen saw that she was throwing protocol aside with casual disregard, he sent a polite but firm communique to her suite, reminding her to follow the station's guidelines. Within an hour, she showed up in his office. Her arrival was as grand as ever. She swept into the security wing like a queen inspecting her subjects. "Security Chief Callen, I trust you have time to speak with me regarding these superfluous regulations," she said, her tone brimming with condescension. He rose from his desk, maintaining a respectful posture. "I do have time. Please take a seat." She remained standing, as though seating herself would lower her status. "You cannot continue to hamper my work here. Any diplomatic negotiation requires flexibility. You would not dare impose so many restrictions on an envoy from the Solar Consortium or the Utari Council, so why must you single out me?" Callen resisted the urge to scoff. "Ambassador Vexan, I assure you, the restrictions are standard. The same procedures apply to every visitor of high rank. Nexus Prime is a hub for many civilizations, and I won't risk its security to accommodate individual vanity." Her cheek ridges flared with a faint turquoise hue, an indication, if the rumors were true, of annoyance or anger. "Vanity," she echoed, as though tasting the word. "Are you implying that my requests stem from my personal whims rather than the needs of the Thexian Confederation?" Callen took a steady breath. "I'm saying that official requests should go through the proper channels, like everyone else. If you feel that something is urgent, I'm willing to review it immediately, but I won't compromise station security for protocol shortcuts." She glared at him, then flicked a hand dismissively. "This is a waste of time. You fail to understand the significance of my work, human." With that, she spun on her heel and strode out, trailing an air of indignation behind her. Word of their clashes spread through the station. Maintenance workers, technicians, and other diplomats murmured about the tension. Some found it entertaining, an alien aristocrat pitted against a duty-bound human. Others worried that the friction might escalate into a diplomatic incident that could jeopardize the station's neutrality. The Thexians were known for their unwavering pride, and the Terran Union had its share of stubborn personalities, but the station's stability relied on a fragile web of alliances and mutual respect. A week later, a hush fell over the corridors when a rumor spread of sabotage. Supplies designated for the Thexian embassy suite had been tampered with, and certain files within the station's central database had vanished. Security protocols flagged multiple anomalies occurring in the same time frame. Callen immediately launched an investigation, suspecting a deliberate attempt to undermine the upcoming negotiations. Selara, upon hearing of the sabotage, immediately summoned Callen to her private lounge. He arrived to find the lounge transformed into a Thexian-style reception chamber, with floating lanterns of neon violet drifting in the air. Selara stood in the center, arms crossed. She dispensed with pleasantries. "You assured me that security measures were sufficient," she said coldly. "Now I learn of sabotage, of stolen data. This is unacceptable." Callen kept his cool. "I'm already investigating the matter," he said. "We have leads. The sabotage seems directed at your negotiation files, as well as certain station systems. Could be political rivals of the Thexian Confederation or enemies of the Terran Union trying to frame someone. We have to be methodical." "Methodical," she repeated scornfully. "Your methodical approach has allowed these saboteurs to strike." She advanced on him, her posture rigid. "I will not stand idle while my mission is jeopardized." His frustration flared. "Then help us by sharing what you know. My team cannot protect you if you refuse to cooperate fully." A flicker of some complicated emotion passed across her features. For a moment, he thought he glimpsed vulnerability behind her haughty exterior. Then, just as quickly, she masked it with scorn. "Do whatever it is humans do to solve such matters," she said. "But rest assured, if I find that your negligence allowed this infiltration, I will hold you personally responsible." He nodded, though his eyes narrowed. "If you have any suspicion as to who might want to sabotage your negotiations, please let me know. I'll do everything in my power to prevent further incidents." She turned away, refusing to answer, and he left the lounge with a grim sense that the sabotage was only the beginning. Despite her outward contempt, Selara realized that the sabotage threatened her standing with her own people. The Thexian Confederation tolerated no failures from its envoys, especially not from one as prominent as Ambassador Vexan. If the negotiations broke down, if the Thexians lost face, she would bear the blame. Her entire reputation rested on concluding this treaty successfully. Despite her arrogance, she felt a stab of unease. Nexus Prime was proving to be more treacherous than she had anticipated. Under the star-flecked dome of the Great Observatorium, a part of the station famed for its panoramic view, Selara stood one evening, gazing upon the swirling clouds of the nearby nebula. She had come alone, seeking a moment of solitude. The Thexian sense of pride and duty warred within her. She loathed the idea of relying on the station's security chief, especially one so infuriatingly steadfast in his rules, yet she was beginning to see that she might not have a choice. She needed answers, and time was running out. As though conjured by her thoughts, Damian Callen entered the observatorium, his footsteps echoing softly. She shot him an icy glance. "Have you decided to follow me around the station now, Chief Callen? Or are you still investigating?" He met her gaze, the starlight catching the streaks of gray in his short-cropped hair. "I didn't know you would be here. I come here sometimes to think. It's a calm place." She arched an eyebrow. "You need a calm place?" "Unusual for someone in your line of work to crave tranquility." "Everyone needs a moment's peace," he replied simply. Then, after a beat, "My team's uncovered a lead. It points to a group that opposes any treaty between the Thexian Confederation and their prospective allies. Might be some fringe faction, but they're skilled. If we want to catch them before they strike again, we'll need your help." She turned away, arms folded. "How convenient. You stand before me now, asking for cooperation. Is it not you who insisted I abide by every protocol?" Callen felt the sting of her words but remained calm. "You're not above protocol, Ambassador, and it's my job to enforce the rules. But you also have a duty to protect your mission. If we can agree to set aside our personal feelings, at least temporarily, we might just stop these saboteurs before they cause real damage." She studied him for a moment, her sharp gaze seeming to peer into his very intent. Then she let out a quiet breath. "Very well, Chief Callen. Provide me with the details, and we will see if collaboration is possible." That night, they pored over security footage, data logs, and coded transmissions. Selara brought her advanced Thexian data tools, which performed complex decryption tasks far faster than the station's standard equipment. Callen contributed his extensive knowledge of station layouts and potential vulnerabilities. They worked in tense proximity, exchanging clipped remarks, each reluctant to praise the other's expertise. The saboteurs had left few traces, but small details emerged: patterns in corridor surveillance, anomalies in supply requests, the fragment of a digital signature traced back to a station subnetwork used by certain unscrupulous traders. All signs pointed to a covert infiltration that ran deeper than a mere act of vandalism. During a late-night session in the Security Ops Center, Selara paused her rapid tapping on the console. She looked up at Callen, who sat across from her, reviewing security schematics. "These infiltration routes," she said, "they correspond to how contraband is often moved through stations, do they not?" He nodded. "Exactly. Smugglers use these hidden corridors and maintenance shafts to bypass customs. They might have a new partner, someone with an agenda against your negotiations." Her lips pursed. "The Thexian Confederation has many rivals, but sabotaging a peace agreement seems extreme. Unless they want to weaken our stance by making us look incompetent, or shift blame onto the Terrans." He rubbed his temples. "The next step is to find out who in the station's underworld might be aiding them. I can assign a team to investigate the cargo docks at 0000 hours, when shady deals usually go down." Selara studied him for a moment, something akin to cautious respect flickering in her eyes. "You are persistent, Chief Callen. Perhaps even more persistent than certain members of my own staff." He almost smiled, surprised by the faint compliment. "It's my job, and I'm too stubborn to let criminals roam free on my watch." Silence enveloped them for a brief moment, broken only by the hum of computer systems. Selara cleared her throat and returned her attention to the data. Callen could not help but notice she no longer carried herself with quite the same haughty aloofness. Necessity had begun to erode the walls of her pride, but only slightly. Late the next evening, a security alert pinged through the station's comm channels. An unauthorized entry had been detected in the sector where critical life support controls interfaced with the main power grid. If sabotaged, it could cripple large sections of Nexus Prime. Callen scrambled his best officers while notifying Selara, who insisted on accompanying him. Clad in a more practical Thexian uniform, she met him at the entrance to the sector. Gone were her flowing diplomatic robes. In their place was a sleek, form-fitting suit with metallic accents. "I will not stand idly by while these criminals threaten my mission," she said, though a trace of concern flickered across her face. You realize this could be dangerous, Callen said, handing her a compact sidearm set to non-lethal mode. We suspect multiple saboteurs. She scoffed softly. I am trained in the Yin defense arts. I won't hinder your operation. He gave her a curt nod. Then let's move. They made their way down the dimly lit corridor, the pressurized hiss of machinery echoing on all sides. Pipes snaked along the ceilings, and overhead lights flickered, casting dancing shadows. Callen led the way, scanning for movement. Behind them followed a small contingent of security officers, weapons at the ready. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the corridor. Callen signaled for everyone to stop. Selara's eyes narrowed, catching the movement as well. With fluid grace, she stepped forward, brandishing her sidearm. Another shape emerged from behind a service console, a figure clad in dark armor, visor reflecting the corridor's flickering lights. Hands where I can see them, Callen ordered. But instead of complying, the figure unleashed a silent burst of energy from a concealed device, forcing Callen and Selara to dive aside. Pulses of bright light hissed through the air, ricocheting off the walls. Selara rolled to a crouch with surprising agility, returning fire with calm precision. Callen's security officers rushed forward, exchanging blasts with the intruder. In the midst of the chaos, Selara spotted a second figure crouched near a junction box, apparently rigging an explosive charge. Without hesitation, she sprinted down the corridor, calling on years of the Yin agility training. Careful, Callen shouted, seeing her race toward the danger. But she ignored him, determined to stop the saboteur before it was too late. She aimed her sidearm and fired a quick series of pulses. One of them struck the saboteur's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Sparks danced from the device he had been working on. Selara lunged forward and yanked away the half-attached explosive, disarming it with a flick of her wrist. A powerful blast of energy from the first attacker caught the edge of Selara's uniform, scorching the fabric. She cried out, momentarily stunned. Callen dashed forward, tackling the attacker before he could fire again. The two men grappled on the ground, the intruder's visor cracking as Callen slammed his helmet against the floor. Security officers surrounded them, quickly subduing the second saboteur. Within moments, the corridor fell silent, save for the hiss of pressurized systems. Panting slightly, Callen rose. He offered Selara his hand, helping her to her feet. She brushed herself off, her ridges shifting from a tense turquoise to a more neutral pale blue. Thank you, she murmured grudgingly, clearly not used to expressing gratitude. He studied her singed uniform, noticing a bruise forming on her cheek. Are you hurt? Only my pride, she said, though her voice held a faint quaver. I should not have rushed in alone. You stopped them from planting that explosive, he said, glancing at the device she had disarmed. You might have saved half the station. We'll need to check what kind of charge it was. She gave a short nod, trying to mask her trembling. Then, with forced composure, she flicked her gaze to the captured saboteurs. We must interrogate them. They know far too much. I will not let them threaten these negotiations. Callen nodded. We'll take them to the detention center and see what we can learn. He saw a flicker of respect in her eyes, mirrored by the hints of gratitude that she tried so hard to conceal. The tension between them remained, but for the first time, there was also an unspoken sense of camaraderie. They had fought side by side, and discovered that each possessed unexpected strengths. With the saboteurs in custody, the station's top interrogators began their work. Selara insisted on observing, using the Yin neural scanners to help detect deception. The detainees, both of unknown species beneath their armor, resisted at first, but piece by piece, the truth came to light. Their organization was part of a clandestine network that opposed any alliance the Thexian Confederation pursued with certain other star-faring civilizations. Their motives ranged from ideological fanaticism to ancient blood feuds. Their orders were to halt negotiations through sabotage, or failing that, cause enough chaos to tarnish the Thexian reputation. One of them, a tall, spindly alien with a reptilian face, hissed under the neural scans that they had further collaborators on the station, others who would strike when the moment was right. Despite the intimidation from both Callen's men and Selara's steely gaze, he refused to reveal names. Only cryptic references to the coming purge escaped his thin lips. In the hush of the interrogation chamber, Selara turned to Callen, her voice barely above a whisper. They could be anywhere on the station, merchants, staff, perhaps even other diplomats. If they strike at a critical juncture in the negotiations, it could unravel everything. Callen's eyes were grim. We'll run deeper background checks on every recent arrival, step up patrols, and lock down the station's most critical areas. But we need a more targeted approach, someone inside their network, or a clue that leads us to their hidden base of operations. Selara exhaled slowly. My people expect me to deliver results. I cannot let these conspirators sabotage our treaty, not when we're so close to finalizing terms. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, then quickly removed it, wary of overstepping. We'll figure it out, and I'll make sure you're safe in the process. She regarded him for a moment, her yellow eyes flickering with emotion. Then she gave a curt nod. Thank you, Chief Callen. Let us proceed. As the crisis mounted, the two adversaries found themselves working more closely than ever. With each passing day, Selara's aloofness waned, replaced by a grim determination. The negotiations themselves were drawing near, scheduled to begin in the station's grand conference hall, a vast chamber ringed by translucent pillars that changed color to reflect the emotional tone of the talks. A marvel of interstellar design, it had hosted countless diplomatic summits. The night before the negotiations, Selara received a cryptic message on her private comm device. It bore the seal of the Thexian Confederation, but the encryption was unlike any standard Thexian code. Only after considerable effort did she manage to unlock it, revealing a simple, chilling directive. Withdraw from the negotiations. Return to Thexia at once. Your safety cannot be guaranteed. Our enemies are stronger than anticipated. Her heart pounded as she read it. The directive carried the authority of the Thexian High Council, yet there was no official signature. Could it be another ploy by the saboteurs to drive her away? Or was it truly from her superiors, implying that the threat was even more severe than she had imagined? With the negotiations so close, she could not simply abandon them. Her entire purpose on Nexus Prime would be undone, her reputation ruined. More importantly, a promising alliance that could benefit millions of lives across multiple star systems might be lost. She wrestled with the decision for hours, pacing her quarters, glancing at the station's distant stars through the window. In the end, she contacted Damian Callen. I need your counsel, she said, her tone subdued. He arrived promptly, stepping inside her quarters with obvious concern. What's wrong? She showed him the message. He read it twice, scowling. We don't know if this is legitimate or a fabrication. Exactly. If my own government truly sent this, it means they have reason to believe the threat is overwhelming. If it's a fake, these saboteurs are trying to scare me off. She pressed her lips together. But even if it's genuine, I cannot leave. The negotiations must proceed. Callen nodded. Then we tighten security even further. My entire team will be on alert. We'll sweep for bombs, infiltration devices, anything. We'll set watchers at every entrance to the conference hall. We will be ready. Their eyes met. For the first time, Selara said quietly, I find myself relying on a human to keep me safe and to help me fulfill my duty. It is an unexpected turn of events. He offered a small, understanding smile. We both want the same thing, peace and stability for the station and for our peoples. My job is to protect everyone here, including you. I'll do whatever it takes. She inclined her head, grateful yet reluctant to show it. Then let us prepare. The day of the negotiations dawned bright and brisk by station standards. Artificial light from the main concourse shone across polished floors, and the grand conference hall gleamed in anticipation of its esteemed visitors. Delegates from multiple factions arrived in dignified processions, escorted by station staff. The air buzzed with tension and excitement. Everyone sensed that something momentous was about to unfold. Selara arrived in formal Thexian diplomatic attire, a deep violet robe with a high collar that framed her slender neck. Strands of precious metal wove through the fabric, reflecting the overhead lights in shifting patterns. She took her place at the central podium, flanked by dignitaries from the Thexian Confederation and their prospective allies. Across the circular hall, Terran Union representatives and other neutral observers watched with guarded interest. Hovering near the perimeter, security teams maintained a discreet but vigilant presence. On a raised balcony overlooking the chamber, Damian Callen stood with a small unit of officers, scanning the crowd. He noted every face, every motion, while an array of sensors tracked energy signatures and chemical traces. Tensions flared when the delegates began their opening remarks. Selara spoke with her usual flair, touting the benefits of interstellar cooperation, but a subtle note of earnestness slipped into her voice. She was determined to succeed, not just for political gain but, Callen suspected, for reasons tied to the pride of her people and to her own sense of honor. Then, in the midst of a polite debate on trade routes, alarms shrilled. Security sensors detected an unauthorized energy surge beneath the conference hall. The delegates froze, confusion rippling through the chamber. Selara's eyes flashed with alarm, and she glanced toward the balcony where Callen stood. He met her gaze, nodding in acknowledgement that he was on it. Chaos erupted as a massive explosion rocked the station's sublevel. The floor beneath the delegates trembled. Windows lining the hall's upper ring cracked, sending spiderweb lines across the translucent panels. Lights flickered in a dizzying pattern. Somewhere, a venting pipe hissed, releasing a cloud of vapor. Callen sprang into action. Security teams, converge on sublevels now. He barked into his comm. He bolted down the stairs toward the lower passages, where an emergency hatch led to the station's environmental systems. Selara, ignoring her staff's pleas to remain safe, ran after him. "You can't keep running into danger like this," he shouted over his shoulder when he noticed her following. "I will not cower while my mission, and your station, is under siege," she shot back, keeping pace. They descended into the bowels of Nexus Prime. Flickering emergency lights lit the corridors in dim, stuttering pulses, giving everything a surreal, half-lit quality. The air grew hot, and their nostrils filled with the scent of scorched metal. Alarms continued their piercing wail. Suddenly, an angular form leapt from behind a bulkhead. One of the saboteurs, identical armor gleaming menacingly. He raised a weapon, sending out a sizzling beam of energy. Callen pulled Selara behind cover just in time, the blast scorching a nearby wall. They exchanged fire, but the saboteur moved with unsettling speed, ducking behind pipes and generator housings. Selara risked a glance around the corner. She glimpsed more saboteurs clustering near a massive conduit that powered a segment of life support for the entire station level. Her breath caught in her throat. If they succeeded in destroying that conduit, thousands of inhabitants could be left to suffocate or freeze. Without hesitation, she shared what she saw with Callen. He paled. "We have to stop them." Signaling to his team through his comm, he tried to organize a flank, but the saboteurs' vantage was too good. They pinned down the security officers with rapid, well-aimed blasts. Selara gritted her teeth. "I have an idea," she said, pointing to a side corridor that curved around the main conduit. "If we split up, I can approach from behind. Once they're distracted, you and your team can push forward." He hesitated, pained at the thought of sending her into danger alone. But they had no choice. "All right," he said. "Just be careful." She managed a tight smirk. "Careful is not in my nature, but I will do my best, Chief Callen." Steeling herself, she darted down the side corridor, heart pounding. All around her, pipes rattled from the station's stress. The saboteurs' voices echoed, distorted by rebreathers in their helmets, as they conferred about placing charges. Selara crept closer, pressing herself against the cold metal. She peered around the final bend and saw 3 saboteurs rigging an array of bombs along the massive conduit. Another stood guard, scanning the corridor with a black, insectal visor. Summoning every ounce of nerve, Selara raised her weapon and fired at the guard. Her blasts tore across his armor, knocking him backward. Immediately, the other saboteurs spun, returning fire. She ducked, yelling into her comm. "Now!" From the main corridor, Callen and his team surged forward, loosing controlled volleys. The saboteurs, caught in a crossfire, scattered. One tried to flee, but Selara sprinted forward, disabling him with a precise pulse. Another lunged at Callen, but he landed a swift strike to the saboteur's torso, following up with a stun baton that crackled against armor plates. While the fight raged, one saboteur crawled to the bomb controls. He pressed a series of buttons, initiating a countdown. A female security officer spotted him, firing a beam that caught his arm, but not before the device's timer locked in. Lights on the charges began blinking in rapid sequence. Only seconds remained. The saboteur hissed with triumph, ignoring the searing wound as he laughed at them. The readout showed less than 20 seconds. Callen rushed to the bombs. "We have to disarm them," he shouted, a note of desperation in his voice. He pressed his scanner to the device, trying to override the lock, but the technology was beyond standard station protocols. It's Thexian coded, he realized, glancing at Selara. You have to do it. She kneeled beside him, eyes wide with urgency. Her slender fingers flew across the control pad, bypassing standard sequences and diving into deeper layers of the Thexian encryption. One by one, she neutralized subroutines, shutting down energy fuses. The device beeped angrily, resisting every intrusion. 10 seconds. 9 seconds. Callen's chest constricted. He could see the beads of sweat forming on her brow. She muttered under her breath, furious that the saboteurs had twisted the Thexian technology to serve their destructive ends. 5 seconds. For seconds. With a final stab at the console, she found the critical override. The device beeped 3 times in quick succession, then powered down, the lights blinking out. Silence. Their hearts pounded, but the bombs did not detonate. She exhaled in relief, shoulders sagging, as Callen helped her to her feet. Behind them, the last saboteur tried to escape. Selara and Callen whirled, leveling their weapons in unison. The saboteur froze, dropping his own weapon. Security officers rushed in, and within moments, every infiltrator was either bound or unconscious. The corridor echoed with the hum of the station's wounded infrastructure, but the immediate threat had passed. They stood there, breathing heavily. Selara's heart hammered, and Callen's mind spun with the reality of how close they had come to catastrophe. She looked at him, for once not guarded by her pride. His gaze met hers, relief and admiration plain on his face. 1,000 words hung unspoken in the air. In the aftermath, repairs to the station commenced swiftly. The saboteurs were transferred to higher security cells for questioning. The Grand Conference Hall, though shaken, reopened for negotiations. The surviving delegates, upon hearing how Selara Vexan had risked her life to stop the bomb, regarded her with new respect. Even her Thexian rivals in the embassy found their criticisms stifled by the undeniable proof of her dedication. The treaty was signed the following week, in a ceremony that lacked some of the planned pomp, but held a quiet dignity born of shared struggle. Selara stood at the podium, speaking of the importance of unity, of how threats to peace could only be overcome by trust and collaboration. As she spoke, she found her gaze wandering to where Damian Callen stood, arms folded, among the security detail at the rear of the hall. Their eyes locked briefly, and a ghost of a smile touched her lips. The final night of her stay on Nexus Prime, Selara sent a discreet invitation to Callen, asking him to join her in the station's arboretum, a lush, climate-controlled dome filled with alien flora. He arrived to find her walking along a path of luminescent moss, the overhead glow casting shifting patterns across her face. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral but friendly. "Yes," she said, pausing by a cluster of tall, spindly plants with shimmering leaves. She turned toward him. "I will depart the station soon, returning to Thexia. The treaty is secure for now, but the work has only begun." He nodded. Peace deals are never just a signature on paper. There's always more to be done. A slight smile ghosted her lips. "I wanted to thank you, properly, for your dedication. When I first arrived, I believed myself untouchable, and that humans were beneath me." She hesitated, her cheek ridges shading a faint turquoise. "You showed me otherwise. You saved my life, and the lives of many others. I see now that my arrogance blinded me to the merits of cooperation." Callen tilted his head. "I'm glad you see that. And for what it's worth, you proved yourself to be more than just a proud diplomat. You acted with courage and skill, and you saved the station. I owe you thanks as well." She studied the luminescent leaves, as though searching for the right words. "In my culture," she said softly, "to acknowledge a debt is a solemn act. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with mere currency or a symbolic gift." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not looking for repayment. The station's safe, the treaty is signed. That's enough for me." She turned her luminous eyes on him, an emotion there that went beyond gratitude. "Perhaps. But should you ever need aid from the Thexian Confederation, or from me personally, know that you have but to ask." He inclined his head. "Thank you, Ambassador." She took a step closer, reaching out hesitantly. Her slender fingers brushed his hand in a delicate gesture, and for a moment, the tension that had defined their relationship melted into something else. Mutual understanding, respect, even the spark of genuine fondness. "Farewell, Damian Callen, she said, her voice quiet but warm. I hope our paths cross again one day, under less perilous circumstances. He gently squeezed her hand before letting go. Farewell, Selara Vexan, he replied, using her given name for the first time. Safe travels. The day of her departure came quickly. A Thexian starcruiser arrived in the docking bay, its hull a shimmering, opalescent shell. Station staff gathered to watch Selara Vexan, now something of a legend after her heroic stand, make her final exit. She walked down the corridor leading to the airlock with her head held high, regal as ever, but missing the disdain that once colored her every step. Damian Callen observed from a distance, standing among his security personnel. She glanced back only once, meeting his gaze. A silent exchange passed between them, one of respect, gratitude, and the faint pang of farewell. Then she stepped onto the cruiser. The airlock sealed with a quiet hiss. Moments later, the ship eased away from the station, merging into the star-flecked void. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of the arrogant alien diplomat who learned humility spread among the station's inhabitants. Some told it as a cautionary tale of hubris and redemption. Others framed it as a testament to the power of cooperation between species. The official records spoke of the bomb plot foiled by swift action from station security and a resourceful Thexian ambassador. Yet, behind every retelling, there was an unspoken truth. Sometimes, the greatest obstacles to peace lie in the barriers we erect around our own pride. Damian Callen carried on his duties with renewed vigor. Nexus Prime's corridors bustled with travelers from across the galaxy. New negotiations began, and old ones concluded. He found himself sometimes pausing by the observatorium or the arboretum, recalling fragments of conversation, the echo of Selara's careful footsteps. Late at night, when the station was quiet, he would turn his gaze to the star fields, wondering what new challenges Selara Vexan faced in her own corner of the galaxy, and hoping that, wherever she was, she still carried the lessons of Nexus Prime close to her heart. Epilogue: A happy return. 10 standard months after her departure, a discreet message arrived in Damian Callen's personal comm queue. At first, he assumed it was routine station business, but the coding was uniquely Thexian. Intrigued, he decrypted it. The text was brief. Greetings, Chief Callen. I have not forgotten my debt. Expect a gift from the Confederation soon. The Alliance prospers, and we owe much to Nexus Prime's security. Be well, and may fortune guide you. S.V. The next day, a small delegation arrived bearing specialized medical technology, Thexian in origin, capable of performing advanced treatments for station inhabitants who had long suffered various degenerative diseases. It was a boon beyond measure for Nexus Prime's medwing, and it would save countless lives. Callen smiled as he stood among the doctors, watching them react with gratitude and astonishment at the Thexian gift. He recalled Selara's words in the Arboretum, how she said a debt could not be repaid by mere currency or token gesture. She had stayed true to her vow, reaching across the stars to deliver aid that would strengthen the bond between their peoples. He recalled how, not so long ago, she had swept in with an almost unbearable arrogance, convinced of her own superiority. Now, she had become an architect of life-changing goodwill. The memory brought him both a sense of pride and an odd, gentle warmth. In his mind's eye, he could still see her faint smile in the Arboretum, the determined gleam in her bright yellow eyes during the sabotage crisis, and the regal bow she offered in farewell. Standing in the corridor after the Thexian delegation departed, Callen gazed through a wide viewport at the bustling traffic of starships coming and going. His reflection stared back, and for a moment, he imagined he caught a glimpse of the tall figure with lavender-tinted lips and shimmering cheek ridges, standing beside him. Then the moment passed, and he was alone again with only his memories, and a gift that would keep on giving for years to come. Nexus Prime remained a beacon of cooperation in a galaxy often fraught with tension. And though the station would see many ambassadors, delegates, and strange new visitors, the tale of Selara Vexan and Damian Callen would endure, whispered in the halls whenever an envoy arrived with too much pride, or when a crisis demanded extraordinary unity. It served as proof that no one, not even the most arrogant among us, is truly untouchable, and that sometimes, to find common ground, two stubborn souls need only stand side by side against the darkness. In the end, the once untouchable ambassador became a symbol of shared destiny between Thexia and Earth, forging an alliance that not only saved lives, but reshaped the station's future. And for all their battles and differences, Selara Vexan and Damian Callen had proven that the walls of arrogance can be dismantled by courage, dedication, and an unwavering resolve to protect what truly matters. For a galaxy that teetered between hope and despair, it was a rare and precious happy ending, one that would echo far beyond the stars of Nexus Prime, lighting the way for those who dared to reach across the void, guided not by pride, but by something far greater.